Major General Carlamiti says what they're hiding from us about the moon. And he goes into what the ancient Greeks were talking about, and even Tesla and Marconi listening to signals from the moon and beyond. He says what they're hiding from us about the moon. They created another vast Gaia, which the moon and the gods called her, while humans, she too has many mountains, many cities, many places to evolve in a month, which the sun does in a year. This is a quote from Orpheus. Proclus, Memoirs of Plato Timaeus, 4, 238-283. The prologue says, long before the conquest of the moon by the U.S. on July 20th, 1968, humans admired our satellite in the sky, but if they knew its peculiarities in relation to the other satellites of the planets of our solar system, they would have to treat it as the greatest mystery of the sky. And he said, before I start referring to the mysteries of the moon, let's take a look back at our mythology, the Greek mythology and ancient history. We have many references to the moon from the texts of Greek mythology that refer to gods and demigods. The demigod Orpheus, son of Apollo, the most regular traveler of the moon, and Sirius, tells us that the moon has mountains, cities, houses. Its surface is soil like the earth and is inhabited by divine societies. Orpheus knew the lunar calendar of 12 months and the phases of the moon. He speaks of the rotation of the earth around the sun, the ecliptic, tropical, and polar zones of the earth, lunar eclipses, the solstices, the equinoxes, the movements of the planets, universal gravitation, and claims that the inhabitants of the moon are those who wandered from planet to planet. In other words, they were ancient astronauts, extraterrestrials. All these claims of Orpheus refer to ancient texts by Plutarch and Diogenes Laertius. Much information from ancient texts come from us from the Telchinus of Rhodes and the Cabiritas of Samothrace, which disappeared according to the myth after the Great Flood. Their technological development was such that it was allowed them to abandon the earth and escape to the moon and Mars on bases used by the gods during the colonization of Earth. We're talking about gods here meaning extraterrestrial sky gods. Now, the Godfather mentioned that Phaethon made 30 revolutions. Not Godfather, the writer Nonnos. The Nonnos mentioned that Phaethon made 30 revolutions around the moon, traveled to Venus, and frequently visited the poles of the earth. Dionysus, Artemis, and Hercules had traveled to the moon, and Edmund, the oracle of the Argonaut expedition, traveled there with his chariot, which resembled a shining comet, giving very accurate information about the unseen side of the moon, which was confirmed by modern science missions, space missions. The Greek-born Lucian from Samosata, Syria in 120 AD read an ancient manuscript and wrote in his book True History, although he described it as a fairy tale, information that was scientifically absolutely accurate, which was verified in our time. He then described 3 ancient aeronauts, 3-headed flying vultures, modern binoculars, anyone could wear them and they could see very far, and warriors in spacesuits. The army of Phaethon was people like us, and that is why they wore thermal suits. He also describes journeys to the stars of the zodiac, as well as the sea voyage similar to that of modern astronauts, and even to the area of present-day Bermuda. Finally, he describes a war between the inhabitants of the moon and Sirius, which he mentions having visited him. Air battles took place in space, where terrible weapons were used, and the Syrians were victorious. The Syrusians were victorious. Sirius is a star, as we know. Now, in most recent history, Greek philosophers knew a lot about the moon. Thales of Miletus, 630 to 543 BC, who is considered the father of Greek and world philosophy, was the first to say that the moon received light from the sun, but also the first to calculate its diameter and orbit. Xenophanes mentions that his teacher Socrates describes it as a large hollow sphere in which there are seas and lands inhabited by people like us. Words of Socrates that are also supported by modern astronomers. Pythagoras of Samos tells us that he made turns around the moon with vehicles of the gods who lived there, in other words, spacecraft, while he mentions that the lunar day is 15 times longer than the Earth's, as it really is. All of Pythagoras' knowledge, mathematics, geometry, physics, trigonometry, music, he states that it's knowledge that he received from the celestial gods with whom he had constant contact. Plutarch, in his About Epsilon book, refers to two races of people who lived on the moon. Heraclitus and the godfathers, the Nonos, spoke about the Drolaris and two other Greek tribes that lived in the Attic Grove before the founding of Athens, and they called them Proselenia, meaning before the moon was present. That is, they were in this area from the time when the moon did not exist. Aristotle also called the Arcades Proselenio, that is, before moon existed. The Pelasgian Arcades were proud of being the only ones who survived the Great Flood. We have similar references from Plutarch, Ovid, Hippolytus, and Lucian. So our satellite, the moon, some later era disappeared in the position it is today. After mentioning the most important elements from mythology and history about the moon, travel 2,600 years ago and think about it, how is it possible for the ancient Greeks to discuss all this about the moon, a time when science fiction did not exist, and ask yourself, how is it possible for ancient myths to manage to touch today's reality and to search results are still characterized as myths? Astronomical data and strange phenomena. The moon, with a diameter of 3,467 kilometers, seems very large in front of the 12,756 kilometers of Earth, and is a contradiction in the rule of creation of the remaining satellites of the planets of our solar system. That is, the Earth-Moon diameter ratio of approximately 1 to 4, when Saturn's giant satellite Titan has a ratio of 1 to 23, and his satellite Ganymede has a ratio of 1 to 27. The Earth-Moon distance is 384,000 kilometers. That is very large, with a ratio of 1 to 32, when the corresponding ratios of other satellites to their planets are on average 1 to 3 or 1 to 13. Such a large distance is not justified. It should be at 1/10 of the distance that it is now, so as not to risk being broken up by the Earth's tidal forces, the Rose limit. Completely coincidentally, the apparent diameter of the moon from the Earth is equal to the apparent diameter of the sun, resulting in the unique phenomenon of total solar eclipses in our solar system. Another strange phenomenon is that the moon rotates around the Earth in the plane of the ecliptic, that is, with a tilt of 5 degrees, while all the other satellites of our solar system revolve around the celestial equator of their planet, that is, with a tilt of about 23.5 degrees. Also, its orbit is almost circular, while all other satellites have an elliptic orbit around their planets. And the most mysterious, the synchronous rotation. The moon rotates around itself and around the Earth at the same time in 29.53 days. That's why we always see one side of it. It's like something sitting at a table and someone else going around the table, so that the person sitting at the table always sees the other person's face. The great astronomer and science fiction writer of the 20th century, Isaac Asimov, also had observed another strange phenomenon: that the force with which the sun attracts the moon is twice as strong as the force with which the Earth attracts it. This disproportion should have pulled the moon out of its place, which for unknown reasons does not happen. This great scientific conclusion, the great scientist concludes that the moon is not a normal satellite of the Earth, since something else keeps it fixed in its place. Many other scientists and researchers who have dealt with the subject and the secrets that Americans and Russians hide about the moon, and from contacts they have had with unexplained NASA sources, have concluded that the moon entered a circular orbit around the Earth thanks to the intervention of an unknown force and is an artificial planetoid, that it is reconstructed and some alien races live inside it. All these parameters cannot be all random. It is as if someone parked it at this specific point. In 1970, Apollo 13 dropped a small amount of explosives on the moon, which caused harmonic vibrations that lasted 3 hours. The moon rang like a bell. In 1971, Apollo 14 dropped its third floor with momentum on the lunar surface. The moon reacted like a big bell, and at a depth of 800 kilometers, the vibrations did not exceed level 2 on the Richter scale. And while during its departure, the same spacecraft rejected its lunar module onto the lunar surface. New vibrations were caused for 90 minutes. These vibrations were repeated at regular intervals, once a month, and with the same intensity for quite some time. NASA stated something strange is happening inside the moon to have this harmony with which we can coordinate our clocks. The chances that this is hollow are very high, they said. The fact that its interior must be hollow is also proven by the large difference in density between the Earth and the moon. 3.33 grams per cubic centimeter for the moon and 5.5 for the Earth. This density is small in relation to its size, while its center of mass is a few kilometers away from its geographic center, in the direction of the Earth, where its crust is thinner. The gravity of the moon is 6 times less than that of the Earth. For example, a 90-kilogram person would weigh only 15 kilograms on the moon. Another mystery is the craters, which look more like shallow dishes than craters because their depth is very small in comparison with their enormous diameters. Normally, because the moon has no atmosphere and the density of the moon is low, meteorites, in addition to not igniting, fall with greater force on its surface than on the Earth, and therefore had to enter at a great depth. The space services of the United States, NASA, and the USSR Roscosmos have established the existence of a metallic shell. Under the outer crust, there is an inner metallic shell with an average thickness of 32 kilometers. That is, in some places it is thinner. Also on its surface, metallic reinforcements have been observed in various places. In 1970, in a report by the Soviet Academy of Sciences entitled "Is the Moon a Creation of Extraterrestrial Intelligence?", which recently came to light, states that the outer surface of the moon is very hard and contains metals such as titanium. Lunar rocks have been found to contain processed metals such as bronze that is, small amounts of elements of uranium-236 and posidonium-237, which are not naturally occurring. Uranium-236 is a long-lived nuclear waste found in spent nuclear fuel and reprocessed uranium. Posidonium-237 is a radioactive metallic element, a byproduct of nuclear reactors in the production of plutonium. Nobel Prize-winning chemist Harold Urey says he was baffled by lunar rocks because they contain 10 times more titanium than similar titanium-rich rocks on Earth. Titanium is used in jet fighter aircraft, deep-sea submarines, and spacecraft because of its hardness. The aforementioned scientist also said that if you want to protect a satellite or spacecraft from the adverse effects of temperature, cosmic radiation, and meteoric bombardment, you would use the above-mentioned shield materials. The lunar surface is also a poor conductor of heat, as American astronauts have also found. The final conclusion of the Soviet Academy of Sciences report was that the moon must be an ancient spacecraft, the interior of which was full of fuel for engines, all kinds of materials and supplies, navigation and observation instruments, and various other mechanisms. Of course, the US and Russia have never officially given this information, with few exceptions, as well as many others that we will see. All of it has been leaked by scientists who served at NASA and Roscosmos, especially after their retirement. Strange flashes and lights. After the discovery of telescopes until today, many astronomers, scientists, and amateur astronomers have observed mysterious flashes and lights in different areas and craters of the moon. In 1783, astronomer Sir William Herschel observed strange flashes in the crater Aristarchus, while in 1963 the American Barrow and James of Lovell University Observatory of Arizona observed the same phenomena in the same crater. The same phenomena have been observed in other areas of the far side in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries until today. So where do these lights come from? Many opinions have been put forward, such as reflection of sunlight, crystalline rocks, volcanic activity, ionization, phosphorescence, and various others. In many cases, we observe that the phenomenon have stated is that all the lights change their intensity, are accompanied by blinding flashes, color change, appear and disappear abruptly, as if someone were manipulating them from a lighting console. And most of the sightings of this phenomenon were observed in the area of the Sea of Tranquility, very close to the point where the first Apollo mission were sent. In the Sea of Chris, arrays of light have also been observed that flash as if directed by someone. Another area with countless such sightings of luminous spots is the Aristarchus crater mentioned earlier, and especially the Platon crater in the Sea of Psyche, where literally thousands of reports of the appearance of luminous spots in a geometric arrangement have been recorded. Groups of scientists who collaborated independently of NASA estimate the number of cases of lights and objects appearing on the surface of the moon to be over thousands of cases. During the Apollo program, NASA recorded over 2,000 cases of lights appearing on the surface of the moon. Parenthesis. Why have aliens given Greek names to many areas of the moon? Did they love us so much? Do you suspect something? Radio emissions from the interior of the moon. After the discovery of wireless transmitters and receivers by the great scientist Nikola Tesla, and more specifically by the end of the 1930s, when these devices had somewhat been perfected, the scientist Grot Reber of the US telecommunications company intercepted radio messages from the interior of the moon. And this was immediately classified, and its publication was prohibited. Several amateur astronomers had also intercepted signals from the moon in 1927, 28, and 34 with radio telescopes of their own construction. In 1935, Marconi and Tesla intercepted similar messages. In 1956, scientists at Ohio State University declared that they intercepted a type of coded message from the moon. It's been leaked that American astronauts, when traveling to the moon, heard a strange music from the intercom system. The French writer Robert Sarrou claimed that the astronaut Alfred Worden of the Apollo 15 mission, while walking on the moon, heard a message of inexplicable words which said, Mara, the Lara, Rabbit, Alardi Didi, and Debe Esa Kunz Alim. This message remains untranslated to this day. This message most likely came from the apostate star city of Lilith, which arrived in the region in 11,600 BC under the leadership which was located behind the moon, to this day under the constant supervision of Andromedans. And certainly the former Soviet Russians would have received such messages, but due to the strict censorship and secrecy that prevailed at the time in the former USSR, they were not made known. So what did the space agencies say about all this? Unfortunately, and as usually nothing, they stayed mute, as they say. In the worst case, they even called the people that report all this that they had lost their minds. Mysterious design and construction on the surface of the moon long before the start of the space programs. Astronomers, professional and amateur, who observed the moon identified various points on the surface of the moon that resembled artificial constructions. Many reports spoke of enigmatic appearances, but also disappearances of various geometric shapes. In 1954, astronomer John O'Neill discovered a structure in the Sea of Chris, similar to a bridge about 2 kilometers long. This was confirmed by other astronomers. This bridge later disappeared. In 1962, astronomers discovered a mysterious square structure in the Sea of Psyche and near the crater of Plato with a cross inside it, and after a while it mysteriously disappeared. In July 1964, NASA Ranger 7 spacecraft crashed on the surface of the moon. Shortly before it crashed, it sent a photo of Earth of strange objects in a perfectly circular arrangement inside the crater. NASA described them as stones, while various researchers spoke of UFOs. The USSR spacecraft Luna 9, which landed on the moon in March 1966 in the Ocean of Storms, photographed structures that resembled towers, places in 3 rows and 3 columns. They appear in relevant videos, the links of which are were given elsewhere. And the American Orbiter 2 in 1966 photographed from a height of 20 kilometers the Sea of Galilee, a building and structure of the shape of Egyptian obelisks, 12 to 22 meters high. Each 3 forms 3 absolutely equilateral triangles. And similar monoliths have also been discovered on the surface of the Mars satellite, the moon Phobos. In 1973, the Soviet unmanned Lohun 2 in the Sea of Tranquility found a 1 meter long metal plate of unusual shine at a very young age. In this same sea, pyramids were observed in the exact same arrangement as those in Egypt, as reported by the Soviet scientist Alexander Abramov. And why did NASA land many of its missions, manned and unmanned, in the Sea of Galilee? The ruins of a complete city have been discovered. It's been photographed by the astronauts of Apollo 9 mission. A tower of about 8 kilometers high and 400 meters in diameter. Over 200 domes of 230 meters in diameter and of an igloo type have been observed since very long ago, which move and change position, probably melt prefabricated conical structures were observed. And in 1865, there were only 2, while today there are over 1,000. As usual, the space agencies say nothing about all this. However, the astronauts of the Apollo missions and the program directors, who are now over 80 years old, have begun to open their mouths as we find out. So please leave your comments about this, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.